Good morning. I haven't seen a number of you for a little while, but we wanted to meet with the governor. The governor invited the speaker and myself and both minority leads to come in and see if we could find a solution to end this stalemate. In the end, I don't think we're any closer to any solution. The House and Senate will move forward with a lawsuit. Effective today, we will have that filed. If we can still find a solution with the governor, we will certainly do that. We would prefer that, but we're not going to give up on some of the issues that we all agreed to moving through the session and the bills that were signed into law. And so that's where we're at right now. I don't know if there's any more that I can say other than that.
So I think we had expectations that hopefully the governor would have had a change of heart in his approach this morning. It doesn't appear that he has the 5 provisions, I think it's 5 provisions, that he would like to renegotiate or change in the bills. As far as we're concerned, goes back on the word that he gave us that he would accept those provisions. So we're not open to that. We still hope that we can find a solution to solve this problem without court intervention, but we certainly feel like we need to protect the integrity of the institution of the House and the Senate, of the legislative branch of government. We feel that that is important, and we will pursue a court option, a legal option, to preserve that co-equal branch of government. That complaint, we did provide a copy of the complaint to the governor and to the legislative leaders as a courtesy this morning. This will likely get filed in district court later this morning, and we're hopeful that the courts will take a swift and firm action to affirm the co-equal branch of government that the legislature is. I also want to go back to just read a quote very quickly. These were the governor's words in his vetoing of our original public safety omnibus bill, where he said, and this is the governor's direct quote, "I strongly believe in the separation of powers among the 3 branches of government. It is not up to me or the legislature to second guess what the judicial branch needs to maintain a well-functioning court system." I think you could substitute judicial branch for legislative branch, and hopefully the governor would appreciate the co-equal branch of government that the legislature is the same way. Unfortunately, he's not living up to what his own words are. So we're very disappointed in the action that the governor has taken, and certainly feel it's our obligation to our employees and to the legislature and to the state of Minnesota that we protect the legislative branch in court, and we will do that.
Do you feel pretty good about your position still? Are you as confident that this is close to a slam dunk as you initially thought?
We do feel good about that. Back in 2011, the courts deemed the legislature to be essential. If you look at the governor's veto letter of the state government finance bill, which is where the legislative funding was that he line item vetoed, that letter, he did not specifically say he had any problem with the legislative funding, that he was using the legislative funding as leverage for other things, and we think that's a violation of separation of powers, and frankly, we hope that the court understands that while it might be the legislative branch's funding that's in jeopardy this time, next time it could be the court's funding, and frankly, I think the courts will side with protecting a co-equal branch of government. We're pretty confident about that.
Yeah, I want to hit that too. So I think a lawsuit should be avoided whenever possible, which is why we took slow steps to get here. The Legislative Coordinating Commission met, and we picked an attorney, but each step of the way we were trying to find a way through this without having to go that step. We had this meeting today, even though we would have filed last week, again, hoping that we would not have to take this step. But we're at a point where we just don't feel like we're going to be able to move forward, and so the lawsuit appears to be the only direction we have at this point.
When we notify staffers they will be laid off?
Well, our hope is that we don't have to lay them off. We'll have to figure out funding. One of the other issues I'm concerned with in the Senate is if we have a Senate building that we have to make payments on, the payments over a year's time are about $8 million. We will prioritize our staff over the building. I told the governor that it's more important for me that our staff both Democratic, nonpartisan, and Republican are taken care of. And we'll just figure out, where can we go and how much money do we have and when will that end. But that's why we're starting the court case today, because we're going to ask for a temporary restraining order that we can move forward, that we can still function as we always have.
How long can you go, Mr. Leader? And same question of the Speaker, if the funding indeed goes away on the 1st of January?
Well, it's only a month or two unless we can figure out some other way to do it. And again, we're hoping that the courts side with us at the very minimum, a temporary restraining order so that we can function as we were meant to function.
Question for you, Mr. Speaker. How long can you go?
We probably can operate somewhere between 2 and 4 months at full funding. We have a plan that we're close to approving that would operate the legislature in pretty much its full capacity, operate the House in pretty much its full capacity for at least 2 months, and then we'd start to kind of wind things down. I think the problem becomes the Senate will run out of money before the House will. So hopefully the court will take action prior to either of those things happening. But frankly, we take this really seriously. I mean, there are, I think about 450 staff between the House and the Senate. Those people work awfully hard at the legislature. Many of them are nonpartisan employees, and we feel like we need to protect them as well as we can, and that's why we're pursuing an option through the courts.
Senator Gazelka, if I can follow up on the Senate building, are you planning to close the Senate building?
So we know that of our budget, roughly $32 million, about $8 million is for the building. And we are not going to prioritize that over our staff. And so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I just wanted the governor to know that my people are more important than the building. And from there, we'll just have to decide how it is. But we're going to prioritize people first. Whether they evict us or not, I don't know. I mean, that is an issue that we have to explore. I mean, but we're not going to jeopardize our staff over that building.
Have you notified staff on these scenarios and what they can expect?
We have not yet. We are waiting for this meeting today. Again, we have been slow to this point, but we know we have to move forward. If we get a temporary restraining order, that changes everything as well. So we'll have to wait and see.
Would this include the state office building too, or just the?
Obviously, the new Senate building was built more recently and has an outstanding bond payment. The legislative appropriation does not include money for the state office building. The state owns that building, and it's operated by the Department of Administration. So the funding for the state office building is not in jeopardy. I think the underlying question here is if we default on bond payments on the Senate office building, it could impact the bond rating of the state of Minnesota. And I think that's an important thing that we need to realize. This isn't a political game that just might affect a few politicians. This affects our employees, their families, and ultimately could affect all Minnesotans if the legislative branch is grossly weakened by this action that the governor has taken, or if the bond rating of the state of Minnesota is jeopardized because of this political action.
You do this unilaterally because it comes out of your budget?
The Senate, the payment for the Senate building is included in the Senate's budget, which was line item vetoed.
Well, how does it affect the bond rating? Will one default? Will one missed payment signify default? How does this affect the bond?
Some of the Senate research has told us that even one payment default would affect it. So we don't know that for sure because we've never been down this route. I'd rather not be down this route. If we can find a way not to do that, that is my hope. But if we don't have any other choice, then that will be impacted.
Is it important enough to agree to a special session so you don't hurt the state's bond rating?
If we could agree for a special session, for example, one thing that was talked about is that we solve the pension issue. That was a bill that did not get signed, that both sides wanted. I would be open to that. We're just not going to give up on some of the small tax relief items. And keep in mind, the $650 million tax bill, only a little over $400 million was actually revenue reductions. The other parts of it were more spending, local government aid, county program aid. That 4-year number of revenue savings is about $1 billion. Compared to spending increases will be $6 billion more over 4 years. So we're not talking about reducing the small amount of tax revenue reduced already. We're not going to take away from that. But maybe we can find something else, and so pensions was one thing that we talked about that we would do. We're looking for a way out of this as well, but not lowering the already small revenue reductions.
You talked about taxes there. Is that a suggestion that the talks they were focused on the cigarette tax, the tobacco tax provisions, and not some of the policy provisions that the governor also mentioned among his five?
Yeah, that's normally what I've heard, and there's been two inflators that he's brought up, the tobacco inflator and the business property tax inflator. So keep in mind, neither one of those are revenue reductions. We're just saying future increases in those taxes we should not do. And I will tell you, I had a former DFL tax chair saying we shouldn't do inflators. Inflators is not good tax policy. So we're just saying, let's leave what we have in place. If we want to talk about some of the bill, like pensions, we would be willing to do that.
And so when you say you would still like to avoid a legal remedy, there's room for talks on a narrow subject matter.
Yeah, we are absolutely willing. We always have been. We always will be willing to find a solution to this that doesn't include going to court. We hope that we can still find that. It's difficult for us, however, to change these items which the governor already agreed to. And there were concessions made in negotiations on both sides to get to the agreement. Those things were all part of the agreement, and the governor agreed to all of those provisions. Going back on that after signing the bills, we think is going back on the governor's word. And frankly, if there's one thing that needs to mean something around here, it's got to be your word. And we took the governor at his word. We believed when he said, "I agree to those things," that he did. He obviously has changed his mind about that and wants those things changed. However, if he wants to change those things, then we probably would want to change a lot of other things, and then the entire thing falls apart. So we think it's best to just leave the agreement the way it was and try to find a solution that doesn't include the governor going back on his word.
One other thing about the overall spending and tax relief plans, that's all signed, it's all into law, none of that's going to change. Spending increased 9%, and we are not trying to take away that, nor are we trying to take any of the tax deductions away. And so we want to leave all that in place. It balances this budget cycle, it balances 2 years from now, so we don't feel like we need to change that as we move forward.
What responsibility do you folks have for, as the governor says, hiding, the treachery of hiding something in the State Department's bill, the state government bill, to force him, to blackmail him into signing the tax bill?
Well, the provision that was in the state government finance bill, we viewed as a necessary insurance policy, not to force the governor to sign anything. He certainly still had his constitutional right to sign or veto either the tax bill or the state government finance bill. But remember that a year ago, the governor said he supported that tax bill. He then took some time, I think 5 days, to find a one-word error in it, which could have been fixed 5 different ways, probably, maybe more. And then he vetoed that bill. And frankly, we believe that after years and years of record surpluses here in the state of Minnesota, that Minnesota taxpayers deserved to share in some of the prosperity that they helped create for the state. So that tax relief bill, while it was, of the money that was spent this particular budget cycle, I think it was $12 of spending increases for every $1 of tax reductions. So we think it was incredibly fair. But the governor obviously didn't like that provision, but it was not hidden in the bill. He certainly knew about it, had every opportunity to know about it. We let them sign off on the bill before it was posted publicly. The bill was then posted publicly for 39 hours before it was voted on. So everybody had the opportunity to read that bill and know that that provision was in the bill. And frankly, in hindsight, it was the right decision to put that provision in the bill. Because of the governor's actions, I can only conclude that the governor was likely not to sign the tax bill. And I think that would have been incredibly unfair to the Minnesotans who have worked so hard to provide this prosperity here for the state of Minnesota. So I think it's just, I think it was the right move to put that in the bill. And the governor had an option. He could have signed those 2 bills or vetoed those 2 bills. And he made the decision to sign them, which is exactly what we thought he would do.
So if I can add to that one too. So if we had had all the spending and none of the tax relief, that would not have been a win for our side of the aisle. We wanted tax relief to farmers, to seniors, to students with loans, small business owners, et cetera. And we were looking for a win-win. The governor wanted more spending than we wanted to give, but we gave that. In return, we expected the tax bill. And the one thing I would say that I wish had happened different is, like the speaker said, he had that bill 39 hours ahead of time. Had he known about it, we still would have passed it. It just wouldn't have passed on Thursday. It would have passed on Friday. So that's the only difference there is he did not bring it up, and so we didn't discuss it. But in the end, I think it still would have come forward. It just would have been a little different, one day different.
Senator, you're going to file this in Ramsey County Court, and does it specifically ask for a temporary restraining order as the first thing you'd like to see?
It's in Ramsey Court, but I don't have the exact details. We were waiting for this day. I was moving forward, thinking that we'd find an off-ramp. We didn't find an off-ramp, and so we now have to strategize, but it will all happen today.
Was there any budging on either side on this, about his 5 items that he wants or anything?
Not from the governor. I think perhaps some people around him might have been open to something else, but not from the governor.
Leaders, are you expecting, I mean, after you file, if the judge grants a temporary restraining order, are you expecting this eventually to go to the state Supreme Court?
I know that it can and probably will, but I don't know that for sure. I've never been down this path before. I don't think anybody has. So.
Should it end up there, though? Is that the appropriate place in your
Well,
opinion?
I think if we're going to do this, I'd rather settle it once and for all. I don't think any governor should be able to defund a House, a Senate, judiciary branch. I think all of those are important. So that would be my preference, is that they settle it now that we have to go this path.
Will we get copies of the complaint?
You will when it gets filed, which I think will probably happen maybe even within the hour.
Yep.
So it'll be happening fairly shortly.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.